The silence and darkness of a moonless night lay heavily over the valley of Montmorency. 11 o'clock sounded slowly from the bell tower of Montmorency. Jeanne de Piennes straightened and stopped working her spinning wheel to count the strokes.
Why did my father seem so shaken when I came home this evening? Why did he hold me against his heart so fiercely? How pale he was! I tried in vain to make him tell me what troubled him.
At last she extinguished the candle, wrapped herself in a cloak, and stepped outside. 50 paces away stood a peasant cottage, and she made her way toward it. As she passed a hedge fragrant with wild roses, she thought she saw a shadow rise on the other side, the shape of a man.
François?
She called, her heart pounding. No answer came. She shook her head and went on. Behind her, the shadow began to move. It slipped toward the house of the Seigneur de Piennes, went straight to a lighted window, and knocked sharply. The Seigneur de Piennes had not gone to bed. He paced slowly across the room, his back bent, his thoughts fixed upon one terrible question. What was to become of Jeanne? The knock at the window brought his miserable pacing to an abrupt halt. He stood motionless, as though awaiting one final disaster. Then he opened the window and looked out. A roar of hatred, pain, and despair tore from his throat. The man outside was one of the sons of his implacable enemy. It was Henri de Montmorency. The old captain spun around, crossed the room in 2 strides, snatched 2 swords from a rack on the wall, and threw them onto the table. Henri climbed through the window. His hair was disordered, his face wild. With a violent gesture, the Seigneur de Piennes pointed toward the swords. Henri shook his head, shrugged, and seized the old man by the hand.
"I did not come here to fight you,"
he said in a voice that bordered on madness.
"What would be the point? I should kill you. Besides, I bear you no hatred. What concern is it of mine that my father brought about your disgrace? I know what happened. Yes, I know it well. Through the constable you lost your governorship, and from wealth and power you fell into poverty and ruin."
"What have you come here for, then?"
growled the old captain.
"Speak."
"You want to know why I am here? Because I know that you owe your misery to the Montmorencys. Because I know how deeply you hate us, old man, and I have come to ask whether it is not the foulest sacrilege that Jeanne de Piennes should be the mistress of François de Montmorency."
The Seigneur de Piennes staggered. A red mist passed before his eyes. His pupils widened. His hand rose as though to strike the young man across the face. Henri caught the hand in a flash and crushed it in his grip.
"You doubt me,"
he roared.
"You blind old fool. I tell you that at this very moment your daughter is in my brother's arms. Come with me, come."
The old man seemed stunned. Without strength and without a voice, he allowed himself to be dragged away by Henri, who kicked open the door. A moment later they stood before Jeanne's room. It was empty. The Seigneur de Piennes raised both arms toward heaven as though calling down a curse, and his cry of despair echoed through the silence of the night. Bent almost double, gasping and staggering, striking the wall as he went, he somehow made his way back to the main room. Henri had already vanished into the darkness, fleeing like Cain after the first murder. Jeanne de Piennes had meanwhile reached the peasant cottage. The first stroke of midnight rang out. At a bend in the path, scarcely 3 paces away, François appeared. She recognized him at once and ran straight into his arms. Their embrace was almost fierce, for they loved one another with all the strength of their hearts.
"My beloved,"
said François de Montmorency,
"our time is short tonight. A horseman arrived at the manor only a little while ago, riding an hour ahead of my father. The constable must find me at the chateau when he arrives. So speak, Jeanne. Tell me what secret weighs upon you. Whatever you have to confess, remember that you are speaking not merely to your lover, but to your husband."
My husband, François. You make me drunk with happiness.
Your husband, Jeanne, and I swear it by the honor of my name, which until this day has never been stained.
Then listen,
she said, trembling all over. He bent toward her. She rested her head against his shoulder and gathered her courage to speak. At that very instant a terrible cry, a cry of mortal agony, tore through the stillness. Jeanne recoiled in horror.
That is my father's voice. François, they are murdering my father.
She tore herself from his arms and ran. Within seconds she reached the house and saw the door and window standing open. An instant later she was inside. Her father lay gasping in an armchair. Jeanne threw herself upon him, sobbing violently, and gathered his white head into her arms.
Father, father, it is I. It is your Jeanne.
The old man opened his eyes and fixed them upon her. Under that gaze she stepped back. No words were needed between them. She understood that he knew everything. Without thinking, she confessed.
Forgive me, father. Forgive me for loving him, and for loving him still. Do not look at me like that. Would you have your poor little Jeanne die here at your feet of despair? I cannot help loving him. Some force stronger than myself threw me into his arms. Father, if only you knew how deeply I love him.
As she spoke, the Seigneur de Piennes slowly drew himself upright to his full height. Without answering, he led her to the threshold of the house, stretched one arm toward the darkness beyond, and said,
Go. I have no daughter.
Jeanne staggered, and a broken moan escaped her. Then a warm, resolute voice suddenly sounded behind her.
You are mistaken, Monseigneur. You still have a daughter, and your son swears it.
François de Montmorency stepped into the circle of light. Jeanne cried out with wild hope, while the Seigneur de Piennes recoiled.
My daughter's lover, here before me.
François remained perfectly calm. He bowed.
Monseigneur, will you accept me as your son?
My son.
Stammered the old man.
You, my son. What am I hearing? Is this some cruel mockery?
François took Jeanne's hands in his own.
Monseigneur, I ask you to grant Jeanne de Piennes to François de Montmorency as his lawful wife.
His lawful wife? I must be dreaming. Do you not know?
I know everything, Monseigneur. My marriage to Jeanne de Piennes will repair every injustice and wipe away every sorrow. I am waiting, my father, for you to decide the fate of my life.
An immense joy entered the old man's heart. Words of blessing were already rising to his lips when a terrible thought struck him. This man sees that I am dying. Once I am dead, he will laugh at the daughter just as his house has laughed at the father.
Decide, Monseigneur,
François urged.
Father, my beloved father.
Jeanne pleaded.
You wish to marry my daughter?
Asked the old man. The young man understood at once what was passing through the dying soldier's mind. A look of quiet, manly loyalty came over his face.
Tomorrow, my father,
he said.
Tomorrow it should be.
Tomorrow,
whispered the Seigneur de Piennes.
Tomorrow I shall be dead.
Tomorrow you will still be alive, and for many years afterward, long enough to bless your children.
Tomorrow,
the old man repeated with bitter anguish.
Too late. It is over. I shall die cursed and in despair.
François looked around him and saw that the servants, awakened by the disturbance, had gathered in the room. Then a magnificent thought came to him. He put one arm around the distraught Jeanne and motioned to two servants to lift the chair in which the Seigneur de Piennes lay dying.
To the church,
he commanded solemnly.
My father, it is midnight. Your chaplain may say his first mass. Let it be the mass that unites the houses of Piennes and Montmorency.
I am dreaming,
murmured the old man.
Surely I am dreaming.
Then the despair in the old captain's heart gave way. His eyes filled with tears, and his livid hand reached toward this noble son of the house he had cursed. 10 minutes later, in the small chapel at Montmorency, the priest stood before the altar. In the front row were François and Jeanne. Behind them sat the Seigneur de Piennes in the same armchair in which he had been carried from the house. Farther back stood 2 women and 3 men, servants of the household and witnesses to this tragic marriage. Before long, the rings were exchanged, and the lovers' trembling hands closed around one another. Then the priest murmured the blessing. François de Montmorency, Jeanne de Piennes, in the name of the living God, you are united for all eternity. The newly married couple turned toward the Seigneur de Piennes, seeking his blessing in turn. For a moment he smiled at them. Then his arms fell heavily to his sides, and that smile remained forever fixed upon his colorless lips. The Seigneur de Piennes was dead.